Walk through a market in Lahore and you'll see the national flag draped across storefronts, a projection of patriotic stability. But beneath that state imagery, everyday citizens are navigating an economic freefall. This chart tracks the country's recent economic indicators, and the first thing that stands out is inflation. As the line climbs steeply, it represents a brutal economic reality that is actively wiping out the domestic middle class. Look closer at the labor data. The government officially claims an unemployment rate of around 7%, but when independent economists calculate the numbers, the actual rate jumps to 22%. It's a massive hidden labor crisis. That economic desperation is feeding into territorial instability. In the western provinces of Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the state is fighting heavily armed internal insurgencies that threaten its physical borders. By any standard metric, this system should break. Yet, global superpowers like the United States and China refuse to let it fail. They continually inject billions in capital to hold the foundation together. They write these checks for one specific reason. The state possesses a fully operational, actively maintained nuclear arsenal. Evaluating Pakistan as a failing democracy explains the symptoms, but it ignores the survival mechanism that keeps the system alive. To understand why this state persists, we have to look at who actually owns it. The civilian government handles the public address, but the office of the Prime Minister carries very little weight. On the ground, elected officials are often treated as mere subordinates to the military command. In Rawalpindi, the military top brass selects the finance minister, manages the electoral count, and sets the red lines for every diplomatic cable. When foreign powers negotiate with this state, they understand that the civilian ministries are strictly bound by the mandates set by the army chief. In this system, the prime minister functions as an expendable middle manager, while the military leadership operates as the unchecked CEO of the nation. This bar chart compares domestic investment rates in South Asia. While neighboring India secures an investment rate of nearly 30%, Pakistan is stagnant at just 13%. This military-run system does not fund itself through domestic industry. Instead, they rely on geopolitical rent-seeking. They monetize their geography and their capacity to cause trouble, extracting revenue from superpowers in exchange for regional cooperation. It requires a delicate balancing act. They lease out their territory as a strategic economic corridor for China, while simultaneously extracting massive development aid packages from the United States. To keep Western aid flowing, they promise robust counterterrorism cooperation. Yet they routinely harbor the exact same high-value militant targets that Western forces are actively hunting. Their financial survival depends entirely on playing both sides. They maintain just enough regional tension to stay relevant, ensuring global empires always need their cooperation. To project power outward against larger rivals like India without triggering a conventional war, the military employs militant proxy groups. These outfits operate as a low-cost, completely demiable enforcement wing. This reliance on asymmetric warfare is woven into the foundation of the state. They have continuously utilized these proxy tactics since the very first conflicts over Kashmir in 1948. Sustaining a permanent state of proxy war requires a unified home front. This led the state to enforce a singular, Punjabi-centric national identity, erasing local heritage for a narrative centered on religious ideology and external threats. Maintaining that artificial identity has a severe internal cost. It requires the deliberate erasure of deep indigenous histories and the violent suppression of ethnic minorities who refuse to conform. Populations in provinces like Balochistan bear the brunt of this marginalization. After decades of resource extraction and political silencing, these groups are now pushing back, launching armed resistance against the central government. The proxy weapons and manufactured ideologies designed to attack rivals abroad are now actively fracturing the country from the inside. The military's rent-seeking business model is finally hitting a wall. Global superpowers are shifting their strategic priorities and running out of patience for the double games. Decades of sponsoring proxy groups have severely isolated the country on the international stage. That reputation effectively chokes off any chance of attracting legitimate, large-scale foreign investment. For rival nations and external observers, it is incredibly tempting to sit back and cheer as this regime faces complete financial and political ruin. But a systemic collapse is a nightmare scenario, not a geopolitical victory. If the central military authority shatters, it leaves behind a massive power vacuum. The heavily armed extremist proxy groups the military spent decades nurturing would immediately rush in to claim that territory. And resting inside that sudden, lawless void would be an actively maintained arsenal of nuclear weapons. We have to stop viewing Pakistan as a struggling democracy that just needs a bailout. We need to start preparing for the catastrophic regional fallout of a military monopoly that is rapidly reaching its breaking point.